Yo, what's up, y'all? Can I get a light, please? What's up, y'all? This is Ed Lover from Hot 97. How y'all doing, all right? Yo, chill out. Yo, hold on. This is my nigga Nas, and we both got one thing in common. We both represent Queens to the fullest. All right? Now, this brother was good enough to stop his show in the middle of the show, and I want everybody in here, everybody stand up on their feet first and foremost, please. No, don't make no noise. Every brother in here, please take your hat off. At 7:03 p.m. New York time, 4:03 p.m. Las Vegas time, Tupac Shakur passed away, y'all. Give me a moment of silence. Now, everybody out there that listen to Hot 97 probably heard about some beef Tupac got with Nas or whatever, with Mobb Deep, whatever. It takes a big motherfucker to stop the Miller hit. Okay? So we can recognize a brother that was part of the hip-hop culture that passed away. I don't give a what Tupac ever said on the record. No matter what, he didn't deserve to die that way. When the fuck are we gonna stop this bull and start loving one another? Don't believe the hype. It wasn't no East Coast, West Coast bullshit. It was some internal LA shit that took this brother out. Can we have a moment of silence for the memory of one of the greatest rappers that will ever live, Tupac Shakur? Now let my Nas do his thing. Y'all enjoy the rest of the show. God bless you, and say a prayer for Tupac.
Yeah, that was definitely real from everybody, you know what I'm saying? Showing your love. My man Ed Lover representing tonight. We gonna keep it going for all my people. Big Doula in the house, Queensbridge, the whole crew, Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, so today is the anniversary of Tupac Shakur's murder. And I thought I would take this time to talk briefly about what Tupac would have come and what we were robbed of the night Tupac was shot, and then when he was killed, whether it was the hospital or from his wounds, which we're pretty sure it was something happened to him in the hospital. There's quite a bit of evidence of that. And what I kind of wanted to talk about was, where was Tupac headed? Tupac was already a superstar, and he was playing venues like House of Blues, in front of whatever, 1,000, 2,000 people. But he was scheduled to be playing for massive audiences, like filling stadiums. And he already had a name that was unlike any other person at that time. And where would he have gone had he lived? He probably would have become a much bigger star than he even was. Gridlock came out, and it was a huge success. Tupac's performance was one that critics talked about and said amazing things about. He was going to continue to get acting roles. He was going to continue to write music. He was going to continue to be an activist. And so Tupac would have definitely had a much bigger following than he had at the time of his death had he lived. And would he have made some mistakes? We don't know. We don't know what mistakes he would have made. We don't know what situations would have been thrown at him to try and trip him up. And we don't know that 6 months down the road he wasn't murdered in some other fashion, and only to have a new murder mystery. Those are things we don't know. But I was at a concert last night, and there were 21,000 people that were at that same concert. I had really good seats. I was in the third row from the floor. I had floor access if I wanted to go down on the floor, which I did not do. But I sat there and I imagined what it would have been like had Tupac lived, and if he was here in the modern day. And we would have we would have walked into a concert where Tupac was performing, and the fans would have been sitting and waiting with anticipation for the moment that Tupac showed up on the stage. The moment that the lights went down, everybody would have been, sitting in deeper anticipation of what's going to happen. Because Tupac was a multimedia star, think about what he would have been able to do with this iPhone generation and how he would have plugged that into multimedia. Think about the show he would have put on, the images he would have put on, the activism that would have been part of his music. And think about the following he would have achieved at this point in his life. He might have gone through some mistakes that led him, to some legal entanglements. But by this point in his life, he probably would have been cleared from all of that and would have been settled down with the family and not focused on some of those things that got him into trouble when he was in his 20s. Young and impetuous, getting sucked into things like, the Orlando Anderson fight. That was a manipulation that was caused, and he got manipulated into that in a place where there's security cameras. And normally that security footage would have been under lock and key, and the MGM would have never let it out. But because of who was working security that night, that tape ended up in David Kenner's hands. And it was used in Suge's probation hearing to put Suge behind bars so that the value of Death Row Records could be stolen. And that all started with a manipulation of Tupac. He would have been past all that by now. And so the lights would have dimmed, Tupac would have come out on stage, the images would have been there, and Tupac would have been talking about some of the things that are happening in our society today. He would have been talking about things like the state of California has eliminated bail, and 90% of the judges in the state of California have been former prosecutors. So you have people who have fought to put other people behind bars, and mostly all they care about is winning. They withhold exculpatory evidence that would show that a person that's been accused of a crime is innocent. That gets withheld from the defense, and it's all about a winning record for these prosecutors, and then they become judges. And now with the bail reform in California, we're going to let prosecutors and judges determine whether somebody should be free. And we look at like Suge Knight's case, and if Suge Knight would have been able to be out on bail, he would have been able to, number one, earn money, and number two, he would have been able to mount a legal defense and not be sitting in prison now with a 28-year conviction. And so Tupac would have very much been fighting for the kids in the inner city that often get charged with crimes. Tupac was somebody who cared about his neighbors and his community and wanted to give back. And so there would have been a profound shift and a profound change in Tupac's community. And I think his music would have reflected what's going on in today's world. Now, those of you who've been following probably read the article that I wrote on reparations. And I got some great feedback from some of you in the inner city that wrote to me or called me or communicated with me in various different ways. And it's always refreshing to me to get new information, because then we get to get a perspective shift that happens. Tupac would have very much been a part of the conversation about reparations. And in that article, I kind of lay out plans on what reparations could look like. And some of the feedback that I got from the inner cities was, Well, wait a minute. This is not a handout. This is for services rendered. And so I've kind of shifted my opinion about that. That now what we should do with reparations is it should be at least a $1 trillion check, and that $1 trillion check should just get written with no strings attached if we really want to deal with reparations. And that check should be set up and handed over to a bank account, and the bank account is earmarked for the black community to send its best and its brightest leaders, however that gets decided, to determine how that money's going to be divvied up. And let the community itself figure out how to divvy up the money, and it should come from the U.S. government with no strings attached, if we really want to deal with reparations. And we need to deal with reparations for the many reasons that I spelled out, but some of those reasons include every single time the black community has started to get a foothold, people have come along and have tried to break the back of the black community to set them back, whether it was Black Wall Street or whether it was crack cocaine on the streets of America or the many, many other things that have happened in the history of blacks in America. And we can only imagine where Tupac would figure into this conversation about reparations. And I think he would have been front and center in that conversation. We heard the Tupac conversation that he had early in his career. I think that was 92 or 93. And such an enlightened, thinking man in Tupac. And so I can just imagine that had he lived, the music that we would have, the art that we would have, the acting that we would have, the media company that he would have been able to build. He was never really paid during his lifetime what he earned, but Tupac had unlimited earning potential. And, you know, we've brought it up before that if the city of Los Angeles was ever found liable for the murder of Tupac, they would have to pay out $1 billion plus triple damages of another $3 billion, so that it could be a $4 billion issue for them. So what I'm trying to do with this video and this tribute to Tupac today, because it is the anniversary of his passing from the planet, is I've tried to give you kind of some visual aids as to what it might look like had you attended a Tupac concert last night or today. And clearly we don't have Tupac with us to know what songs he would have played and performed at a concert that he put on. We don't know what the music would have sounded like, but we know that Tupac was always evolving as an artist. We don't know what movies he would have starred in. We don't know what movies he would have written. But we do know that Tupac was quite a talent, and there will never be another Tupac Shakur. And so here we are, September the 13th, and I just want to shout out to all of those out there that are true Tupac fans, that imagine who Tupac would have become. Imagine what forces would have risen to try and stop him, but also what forces would have rallied behind him to protect him and to help him in his activism, in his acting, in his songwriting, in his performing, rapping, and all of the other things that Tupac was known for. Just think about the poetry we might have. So we all have truly been robbed by the death of Tupac Shakur, his murder. And that murder does need to officially be solved. And those who are guilty of this need to be brought to justice. So I hope you all will get active, get vocal, and in the spirit of Tupac Shakur, not the pacifist Tupac Shakur, but the activist in Tupac Shakur, I think it's time for all true Tupac fans to demand that LAPD, Las Vegas Police, FBI, Donald Trump, Congress, whatever, get to the bottom of what happened and start calling witnesses and make an arrest, make arrests, convictions, trials, and bring closure to this whole thing. A few people are saying, hey, let the dead rest in peace. Well, okay, let's let the dead rest in peace. But there's something inside of our society that does need to know what happened and bring those perpetrators of the crime to justice. I think we have quite a few indicators of what happened, and there's more yet to come that are going to be revealed as time does go on. There still are witnesses that can be called. There are people that can be interrogated. There's evidence to collect in these murders. And to Tupac fans everywhere, it is time for you to be a little bit more vocal. Suge Knight said this just before he was shot at the One Oak nightclub. He said it's time for Tupac fans to be more vocal and to demand things. And then Suge Knight gets shot at One Oak. 6 months later, he runs over Terry Carter and gets incarcerated and has never seen the light of day since then. And you always have to wonder if, because he started to be a little bit more vocal, that it just wasn't the forces that are behind all of this reaching out to take him out of the game. Anyway, more later.
Don't believe the hype. It wasn't no East Coast, West Coast bullshit. It was some internal LA that took this brother out. Can we have a moment of silence for the memory of one of the greatest rappers that will ever live, Tupac Shakur?